This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about two different ways that the U.S. can use to default on its debt. This is a question I've been getting a lot lately. It's first important to understand what default means. A sovereign default is basically when a country takes on so much debt that it's unable to pay back that debt, and it has to look for other solutions. The first form of default is what's called a hard default, and this can take a couple different forms. The first form would be the U.S. would fail to make an interest payment on its debt, a quarterly or semi-annual interest payment, or it could miss out on a few interest payments. If we take a look at what the interest on the debt is currently, it's $420 billion per year. Is the interest on the debt. So it's a lot of money to make these interest payments. The second thing the U.S. could do as part of a hard default would be to refuse to pay back some principal. This would be what's often called debt restructuring. So let's say you have $100,000 worth of treasury bonds in your retirement account. Government comes to you under the situation of a hard default and says, sorry, those aren't worth the paper they're written on anymore. But we've got a great deal for you. If you turn them in, we'll give you shiny new Treasury 2.0 bonds. Now, we're not going to emphasize that these new bonds are going to start out being worth $70,000 instead of $100,000, but we know which option you're going to take because you can either choose zero, you can hold on to those existing bonds, or you can get our shiny new bonds for that are worth $70,000. So, of course, all the bondholders, some money is worth more than no money. All the bondholders decide to take what's called a haircut. They take a 30% haircut. The value of their bonds goes from $100,000 to $70,000 overnight in terms of the par value. And then the great thing for the government, it's cheated bondholders, but the total government debt then magically goes down by 30% if they restructure all of their debt. Unfortunately, as we said, if you're holding this debt in a retirement account and you thought you've done the really conservative thing and put it in conservative U.S. Government bonds or treasuries, your account just went down 30% in value because of this haircut. Now, this is actually fairly common. This happens quite a bit. It's never happened in the U.S. as far as I can remember. Maybe it happened during revolutionary times, but it's happened a lot, for example, for Argentina. Argentina first became independent from Spain in 1816, and since then, it's hard defaulted on its debt 9 times since then, which is just unbelievable. It looks like it's getting ready to default again. This is a recent story. The bonds are pricing in another default. So that's the first way you can default on your debt. That's the first path the U.S. could take. Before I talk about the second path, if you're finding this video helpful so far, or if you watch my videos regularly on this channel and you're not subscribed, please subscribe and like this video. Maybe share it with a few friends so we can help to get the word out. The second form of default would be what's called a soft default. And this is where the U.S. will continue to pay back principal and make interest payments, but it will devalue the U.S. dollar. So the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank in the U.S., will devalue the U.S. dollar by printing a lot more U.S. dollars. This is what they have been doing. And then the U.S. government, the Treasury, gets to pay back bondholders with money, with U.S. dollars that are worth less. This is one way to conceptualize it. So you still get back your $100,000 back from the government. You still get your semi-annual interest payments. But unfortunately, because of the currency devaluation against real things, this $100,000, let's say housing prices, the median price of the price of a median house in the U.S. was roughly $400,000. Now it's $500,000. And so what's happened is under this soft default scenario, you get your $100,000 back from the government, but now it only buys you 1/5 of a house instead of 1/4 of a house because the price of housing has gone up, or the price of the average or median house has gone up from $400,000 to $500,000. Now, this is where inflation comes from. It comes from bad government, bad central bank policies for the most part. It can take the form of asset price inflation, stocks and housing prices going up, or rather than their prices going up, it's just the currency going down. And so it appears that the housing and stock prices are going up. This is really what we've been seeing over the last decade in the U.S. And then consumer price inflation, which shows up in the form of groceries and gas, etc. And this CPI inflation tends to hurt the working class and middle class more. The upper classes that hold more assets like stocks and houses and Bitcoin, they benefit from asset price inflation. Now, I'm going to maintain that the U.S. will never do a hard default. We often hear these clickbait news stories about this, and politicians like to use it to get attention, but it really is just political theater. It would be disastrous if the U.S. ever did a hard default. If it missed interest payments, it would or failed to pay back principal, there would be this spiraling effect, this effect of contagion that would affect all asset classes, and you really would have like an overnight global stock market and bond market crash. And so no one wants this. This is the kind of thing that leads to revolution, that leads to war, and leads to the entire planet basically going into disarray. And the world reserve currency country, which the U.S. still is, does not need to ever go down this path and do a hard default, since they can always just print up more money. So the U.S. debt default that we're seeing now, it's not going to be and it has not been a fast train crash, but it's really been a slow motion train crash. And as such, it's really hard to keep your eyes off of it because the wheels are coming off. We're barreling straight ahead. Everyone knows where this is headed. And it's going to be really ugly, but it is slow motion, though it has certainly accelerated in the last 18 months. When you see these headlines, as we said, these default headlines, this is really just a strike of the pen that can raise the debt ceiling, which is a limit on how much the U.S. can borrow. And we saw that a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, the Congress did approve this increase in the debt ceiling. They raised it by $2.5 trillion. I thought it would be. Well, before we talk about that, let's just summarize. And then I have one final point that I think you'll find very striking. When a country takes on too much debt, as the U.S. has done, its bondholders are going to get hurt badly. They're probably not going to get hurt badly on a nominal basis, which is what always happens to Argentinian bondholders. That's where you get back 70 cents on the dollar. That's getting hurt on a nominal basis. The more common way, as I said, and the way that will be chosen by the global reserve currency country, which is the U.S., is to hurt bondholders on a real basis. Real basis just means you're adjusting for inflation. And so we have this situation where the Fed prints money and buys bonds. This is what QE is, quantitative easing. They've been scaling it back. I don't think they're going to be able to scale it back much more. But the Fed prints money, buys bonds, tries to keep bond yields below the rate of inflation, both through their interest rate policy and through their bond purchases. And so you end up with a situation where consumer price inflation, at least the official headline number, the real number is probably much higher than this, but even the headline number is 6.8% over the past year. The 10-year Treasury yield is 1.41%. And so if you just take the difference between those, you can say that 10-year Treasuries have a real yield of minus 5.39%. I'm just subtracting 1.41 minus 6.8%. So what we can say is that if you're a bondholder, if you're holding one of these 10-year Treasuries, all else being equal, you're basically losing 5%, a little more than 5% of your purchasing power on an annual basis. Plus, you're losing the opportunity cost of having been in assets that are performing better, as well as the fact that these dollars that you're holding are being devalued as well with increased money printing. So this is what a soft default looks like, and it's already happening. The U.S. is in a state of default, and we're taking the soft default exit. This is why the stock market has mostly just gone straight up for the past 10 years. This is why Bitcoin has mostly gone straight up. This is why housing has gone straight up, not because these assets are doing especially well, but just simply because the fiat currency that they're denominated in has been plummeting, and bondholders are definitely bearing the brunt of it. This is why you shouldn't keep money in bonds anymore if you can help it. So I thought one thing that might be fun to do is we can take this $2.5 trillion debt increase that the U.S. government now has permission to spend because the debt ceiling's been raised. We can divide that by the current price of Bitcoin, which is roughly $47,000 per Bitcoin. We end up with about 53 million Bitcoin. So what this means, if we translate this news headline from US dollars into Bitcoin, Congress just raised the debt ceiling, the US debt ceiling, by 53 million Bitcoin. And what's the problem with this? Of course, the problem is there's only going to be ever 21 million Bitcoin, probably 3 or 4 million less than that because a lot of them have been lost. So what this means is that the price of Bitcoin, well, the first thing it means is this is an absolutely enormous debt ceiling increase, especially when you start thinking about it and denominating it in Bitcoin. What this means, in effect, because you can't print more Bitcoin, just as the Fed is going to have to print more dollars, it means that the price of Bitcoin as a neutral reserve asset, which is what it's evolving into, a sort of form of digital gold, it's a non-sovereign store of value. It's not backed by any country. It's completely neutral. The price of this Bitcoin needs to ratchet higher. This is why Bitcoin is the best life raft in the world right now. You can hide out from Fed money printing and a soft default in bonds, which won't work very well. It'll work a little bit better if you use stocks or real estate. But the best form, the best hedge against these terrible central bank policies and a U.S. debt default, a soft debt default, is Bitcoin. I often hear people say Bitcoin's the iceberg that's taking down the system. It's actually not the iceberg. I would say the iceberg the equivalent for the Titanic, the iceberg here is just the bad decisions made by politicians and central bankers. Bitcoin is the life raft, and it's still available to basically anyone in the world. You don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. It's divided into, each Bitcoin's divided into 100 million Satoshis. And what we're going to see as bondholders wake up to this, and a lot of them already are institutional investors, and realize how they are being, how their bonds are being devalued, how their purchasing power is being lost. There will be this gradual exodus that's already started, this exodus from people's portfolios, from the bond piece. It'll continue to flow into the stock allocation in the portfolios, but also into things like Bitcoin. And Bitcoin really is the cleanest and safest way, in my opinion, to hedge against a U.S. soft default. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.